I never imagined that 52 years after I first put on a United States Marine Corps uniform, my own daughter would look me in the eye and tell me I was too broken to be around her children. But that's exactly what happened on a Thursday afternoon in November, standing in the driveway of her house in Scottsdale, Arizona, watching her pack my belongings into garbage bags. You need to understand something before I go any further. My name is Robert Samuel Jennings. I'm 73 years old. I served 2 tours in Vietnam with the 3rd Marine Division, came home with a Purple Heart, a Bronze Star and shrapnel in my left leg that still sets off metal detectors at airports. I raised my daughter Michelle alone after her mother left us when she was 6. I worked as a machinist for 41 years at the same plant in Toledo, Ohio. Never missed a mortgage payment, never missed one of Michelle's soccer games or parent-teacher conferences. Put her through Arizona State University without her taking a single student loan. And now here I was, 73 years old, watching my only child throw my clothes into trash bags like I was some stranger she was evicting. Dad, Kevin and I have talked about this. Michelle's voice was tight, controlled. That's the voice she uses when she's already made up her mind and doesn't want to hear anything that might change it. Her husband Kevin stood behind her on the porch, arms crossed, not even having the decency to look at me. You've been living with us for 8 months now. The kids are scared of you. Scared of me? I repeated. My granddaughter Emma had just turned 9. My grandson Tyler was 7. I'd been reading them stories every night, teaching Emma how to play chess, showing Tyler how to tie proper knots. Scared of how? You wake up screaming, Dad, 3, 4 times a week. You knocked over the bookshelf last month during one of your episodes. Tyler asked me if Grandpa was going to hurt us. Michelle's eyes were wet, but her jaw was set. We can't live like this anymore. Kevin's parents are coming to stay for the holidays, and we need the guest room. We found you a studio apartment near the VA hospital. First month's rent is paid. Kevin will drive you there this afternoon. I looked at Kevin. Finally, he met my eyes. Sorry, Robert. It's just what's best for everyone right now. Best for everyone. I'd heard that phrase before. That's what the VA counselor said when she prescribed the pills that made me feel like I was underwater all day. That's what my supervisor said when he encouraged me to take early retirement after I had a panic attack on the factory floor. Best for everyone always seemed to mean best for everyone except me. How much is the rent? I asked quietly. Michelle looked away. $850 a month. My disability check was $1,200. After rent, I'd have $350 for food, medication, utilities, everything else. I'd been giving Michelle $500 a month to help with groceries and utilities while I stayed with them. Apparently that wasn't enough to earn me the right to stay in my daughter's home. When do you need me out? Kevin stepped forward. Like I said, this afternoon would be good. My parents arrive tomorrow morning, and we want to get the room set up, today. On 5 hours' notice, I was being put out of my daughter's house. I'd left Vietnam with more warning than this. I see. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Flat. That's what happens when you've been through enough. You learn to turn off the part of yourself that feels things too deeply, because if you don't, you'll never survive. Let me get my things. They're already packed, Michelle said, gesturing to the 6 garbage bags on the driveway. I inventoried your medications too. Made sure you have everything. How thoughtful. She flinched at my tone. Dad, don't make this harder than it needs to be. Harder? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Michelle, I held your mother's hand while she was dying. You were 14. You asked me if I'd ever leave you like she did. Do you remember what I told you? Her face crumpled for just a moment. Dad, please. I told you that I would never, ever leave you. That you were stuck with me for life. That's what I said. Do you remember that? This is different. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're doing exactly what your mother did. You're just doing it slower and calling it kindness. Kevin moved down from the porch. Okay, Robert, that's enough. You're upset. We get it. But you're not going to talk to Michelle like that. I looked at this man, this accountant who'd never spent a day in his life doing anything harder than a spreadsheet, and I felt something old and cold settle into my chest. You're right. I apologize. Michelle, I hope Kevin's parents enjoy the guest room. I hope they're more grateful than I was. 20 minutes later, I was in Kevin's BMW, my garbage bags in the trunk, driving through Scottsdale toward an apartment I'd never seen. Kevin tried to make conversation twice. Both times I pretended I couldn't hear him over the road noise. He gave up after that. The studio apartment was in a complex that had been built in the 1970s and hadn't been updated since. Beige walls, brown carpet, a window that looked out at a parking lot. 400 square feet for $850 a month. I'd lived in bigger fighting holes in Vietnam. Kevin helped me carry the bags up to the second floor. "Well," he said, awkwardly standing in the doorway, "I guess this is it. We'll be in touch, Robert, really, sure you will. Right up until you need a babysitter, and remember I'm too broken to be around children." He left without another word. I spent the next hour unpacking garbage bags, hanging up the 23 shirts that constituted my entire wardrobe, arranging my medications on the bathroom counter: prazosin for nightmares, sertraline for depression, gabapentin for the nerve pain in my leg. Bottles and bottles of pills that were supposed to make me whole, but only seemed to make me numb. By 6 o'clock that evening, I was sitting on a used couch that smelled like cigarettes and old coffee, eating a sandwich I'd made from the groceries Michelle had packed for me, when my phone rang. It was Eddie Kozlowski. Eddie and I had served together in Vietnam. He was my radio operator during the Tet Offensive. Saved my life twice, once by tackling me out of the way of mortar fire, and once by carrying me 3 clicks through the jungle after I took shrapnel to the leg. We'd kept in touch over the years, Christmas cards and occasional phone calls, but we hadn't seen each other in person since 1998, when we both attended a reunion in Washington. Bobby J. Eddie's voice was as loud and cheerful as ever. "How the hell are you?" "I've been better, Eddie." "What's going on?" "What's going on is I'm in Phoenix for 3 days on business, and I just realized you're down in Scottsdale. I looked you up. Says you're living on East Camelback Road. That anywhere near the airport?" "Pretty close. About 20 minutes. "Outstanding. I'm flying out Sunday morning, but I've got tomorrow and Saturday free. You busy?" "Not particularly." "Good. Then you're having breakfast with me tomorrow at 0800 hours. There's a diner near my hotel called the Saguaro Sunrise. You know it? I can find it. See you then, brother. And Bobby? It'll be good to see you." "Really good." He hung up before I could respond. I sat there holding the phone, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Not quite hope, but maybe the memory of what hope used to feel like. The Saguaro Sunrise was the kind of place that serves breakfast all day and has a waitress who calls everyone honey. Eddie was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth, and the moment I saw him I felt 50 years fall away. He'd aged, of course. We both had. His hair was white instead of the black I remembered. He'd put on weight, gotten soft around the middle the way men do when they're no longer running 10 miles a day with a 60-pound pack. But his eyes were the same. Sharp. Alive. The eyes of a man who'd seen the worst the world had to offer and decided to keep living anyway. "Bobby J." He stood up and grabbed me in a hug that would have cracked the ribs of a younger man. "Christ, look at you. You look like hell. You're too kind. I'm serious. What's going on? Last time we talked, you were living with your daughter, helping out with the grandkids. Now you're looking like you just lost your best friend." We ordered coffee and eggs, and I told him everything. Michelle's decision, the studio apartment, the garbage bags, all of it. Eddie listened without interrupting, his face getting darker as I talked. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Your kid's an idiot." "She's scared," I said. "The nightmares are bad, Eddie. I knocked over a bookshelf during one. She's got young children in the house. I get it, bullshit." Eddie's voice was hard now. "You know what? I get nightmares too. My wife Patricia has been dealing with them for 47 years. You know what she does? She wakes me up. She holds my hand. She reminds me where I am. That's what family does, Bobby. They don't pack your shit in garbage bags and rent you a studio apartment. She paid the first month. Oh, well, in that case, she's a saint." I couldn't help it. I laughed. Eddie always had a way of cutting through the crap and getting to the truth of things. "Look," he said, leaning forward. "I'm out here because my company is bidding on a contract. Big one. Installation and training for a new medical record system at the VA hospital here. I'm supposed to be meeting with hospital administrators, touring the facility, the whole dog and pony show. But I've been thinking about something lately, and seeing you like this, it's pushing me to make a decision I've been putting off." "What decision?" "I'm retiring, Bobby. End of this year. Patricia and I bought a place in Sedona 3 years ago." Beautiful house, view of the Red Rocks, everything we ever wanted. But I've been dragging my feet on actually moving there because the business keeps me busy, and busy means I don't have time to think. But sitting here with you, seeing what happened with your daughter, it's making me realize something. We didn't survive Vietnam just to die alone in shitty apartments eating microwave dinners. What are you saying? I'm saying, come stay with me and Patricia in Sedona. We've got 4 bedrooms and 2 people rattling around. I'm saying you could help me with a project I've been thinking about. And I'm saying that you deserve better than what your daughter gave you. Eddie, I can't just move in with you. Why not? You got something better lined up. A parade of people lining up to appreciate you. I have my VA appointments here. My medication is set up through the Phoenix Hospital. Sedona's got a VA clinic. We'll transfer your care. Bobby, I'm not asking. I'm telling you, tomorrow you're coming to the VA hospital with me. I want you to see something. Sunday we're driving up to Sedona together. You can give your daughter back her first month's rent and tell her to use it for therapy, because clearly she needs it more than you do. What project? I asked. Eddie smiled. That's my Bobby J. Always focused on the mission. I'll show you tomorrow. For now, just trust me. Have I ever steered you wrong? You got us lost in Saigon once. Ended up in a bar that was definitely not on the approved list. And didn't we have the time of our lives? We got malaria, but we had fun first. Eddie waved his hand. Details. Be at my hotel at 0900 tomorrow. Wear something presentable. We're meeting with people who think veterans are supposed to look like recruitment posters. The next morning, I met Eddie in the lobby of his hotel. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly disability check, and he'd brought me one too. You're not meeting VA administrators in jeans and a flannel shirt, he said, handing me the garment bag. Get changed. We've got 15 minutes before Richard picks us up. Who's Richard? My driver. The company pays for it when I travel. Perks of being a VP. Eddie, what the hell do you do? I told you. Medical record systems, database management, cloud infrastructure. All the boring stuff that keeps hospitals running. But the boring stuff pays very, very well. Now get dressed, clock's ticking. Richard turned out to be a quiet man in his 60s who drove a black Lincoln Town car and called Eddie Sir. We arrived at the Carl T. Hayden VA Medical Center at exactly 0930, and Eddie led me through the facility like he owned it. He shook hands with administrators, introduced me as his associate, Robert Jennings, and brought me into meetings about electronic health records and cybersecurity protocols and budget allocations. I understood maybe 30% of what was discussed, but I understood 100% of what I saw in the hallways and waiting rooms. Veterans, dozens of them, old men in wheelchairs with Vietnam unit patches on their caps, young men and women, Iraq and Afghanistan veterans, some missing limbs, some whole on the outside but clearly broken on the inside, and in every face I saw something I recognized, that specific kind of loneliness that comes from having given everything to your country and wondering if anyone noticed. After 3 hours of meetings, Eddie and I had lunch in the hospital cafeteria. So? He asked. What do you think? About what? About what you saw? The veterans, the system, all of it. I think the system is overwhelmed. I think there are a lot of people falling through the cracks. I think the administrators mean well, but they're buried in paperwork and regulations, and they can't see the human beings drowning right in front of them. Eddie smiled. That's exactly what I think too. Bobby, my company is profitable enough that I can do whatever the hell I want for the next 10 years before I actually retire. And what I want to do is this. I want to create a program that connects veterans, not through bureaucracy or forms or waiting lists, just person to person, veteran to veteran. How? That's what I'm figuring out. But here's what I know so far. I've got the money to start a foundation. I've got connections with VA hospitals across the Southwest. What I don't have is someone who understands what veterans actually need. Someone who's lived it. Someone I trust. He paused. I need a partner, Bobby. Someone to help me build this thing from the ground up. Someone to visit VA hospitals with me, talk to veterans, figure out what's missing. It wouldn't be a paycheck at first, but I'd cover your living expenses, room and board in Sedona, vehicle for getting around, stipend for meals and incidentals, and once the foundation is properly funded, a salary, a real one. I stared at him. Eddie, I'm 73 years old. I have nightmares 4 times a week. I can't even manage to stay in my own daughter's house without terrifying children. Patricia has dealt with my nightmares for 47 years. She'll deal with yours too. And as for the age thing, Bobby, every veteran we'd be helping is either our age or younger. They need to see someone who's been where they are. Someone who's still standing. That's you. Why me? Because you're Bobby J. Because you carried Corporal Morrison 5 clicks through enemy territory with a bullet in your shoulder. Because you didn't leave anyone behind then, and you won't leave anyone behind now, and because I need you. He leaned forward. I've got plenty of business partners, Bobby. Men who are smart and capable and who'd be excellent at running a foundation. But I don't trust them, not really. I trust exactly 3 people in this world. Patricia, my daughter Jennifer, and you. So I'm asking, will you help me? I looked around the cafeteria, at the veterans eating lunch. An old man in a World War II cap eating alone. A young woman in a wheelchair, probably Afghanistan, staring at her phone with the kind of empty expression I knew too well. A middle-aged man with a Vietnam patch on his jacket, smoking a cigarette outside the window despite the no-smoking signs. When do we start? Right now, Eddie said. First thing we're doing is getting you out of that depressing apartment. I've already talked to Patricia. She's expecting us Sunday afternoon. Second thing we're doing is making a list of every VA hospital and clinic within 200 miles of Sedona. Third thing is, we're figuring out what veterans need that they're not getting, and then we build it. I didn't tell Michelle I was leaving until Saturday morning. I called her instead of texting because I wanted to hear her voice when I told her. Dad? She sounded surprised. I hadn't called her in 3 days. Is everything okay? Fine. I'm calling to let you know I'm moving to Sedona tomorrow. I'm going to be working with an old friend on a veterans foundation. I won't need the studio apartment after this month. There was a long pause. Sedona? Dad, that's 2 hours away. 2 hours and 15 minutes, I looked it up. But what about your medications, your VA appointments? Transferring to the Sedona clinic. Eddie's helping me set it all up. Eddie? Who's Eddie? Eddie Kozlowski. We served together in Vietnam. He's a good man, Michelle, better than most. Another pause. Dad, I don't understand. This seems really sudden. Sudden? Like being given 5 hours' notice to pack my life into garbage bags. That kind of sudden. I heard her inhale sharply. That's not fair, isn't it? Look, Michelle, I'm not calling to fight. I'm calling to say goodbye and to tell you that I won't be a burden to you anymore. You wanted me out of your house. I'm out. You wanted me to stop being an inconvenience. Consider it done. Dad, you're not being fair. We were trying to do what was best for everyone. There it is again, best for everyone. You know what I figured out this week, Michelle? Best for everyone always means best for everyone who matters. And apparently, I don't matter. Not to you, not to Kevin. Probably not to Emma and Tyler either, once you finish teaching them that Grandpa is too broken to be around. She was crying now. I could hear it. You don't get to do this. You don't get to make me the villain because you have PTSD and I couldn't handle it. You're right. I don't get to make you anything. You made yourself, Michelle. You chose to pack my things in garbage bags. You chose to give me 5 hours' notice. You chose to tell me your children are scared of me. Those were your choices. Own them. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking. Not from anger, exactly. From something older than that. The feeling a man gets when he realizes that the people he thought would be there forever are already gone. Eddie picked me up Sunday morning in a red Jeep Wrangler. Patricia was in the passenger seat, a small woman with white hair and a smile that could light up a room. Robert, she hugged me like we were old friends even though we'd only met twice before. Eddie's been talking about you non-stop since Friday. I'm so glad you're coming to stay with us. The house has been too quiet. The drive to Sedona was beautiful in a way that made my chest ache. Red rocks rising up against blue sky. Desert landscape that somehow felt ancient and new at the same time. Patricia talked the whole way, telling me about the house, the neighbors, the hiking trails nearby, the coffee shop in town that made the best breakfast burritos in Arizona. We pulled up to a sprawling ranch-style house with massive windows that looked out at Cathedral Rock. It was the kind of place you see in magazines and assume is owned by movie stars or tech millionaires. Eddie caught my expression and laughed. Relax, Bobby. It's just a house. Patricia and I got lucky with some investments in the 90s. Tech stocks. Bought a bunch of Apple when everyone thought they were finished. Turns out we were smarter than we thought. Patricia showed me to my room. king bed, private bathroom, a desk by the window with a view of the rocks. On the desk was a framed photograph of Eddie and me, 19 years old, standing in front of a Huey helicopter in Da Nang. I'd forgotten that picture existed. Eddie kept it all these years, Patricia said softly. He talks about you more than he talks about anyone from the war. Says you were the best Marine he ever knew. I wasn't. I was just trying to survive. That's what makes you the best. She squeezed my shoulder. Dinner's at 6. Until then, rest, unpack, get comfortable. You're home now, Robert. Home. I hadn't felt like I had a home in 8 months, maybe longer. That night, over steaks that Eddie grilled on a back patio that cost more than most people's cars, we talked about the foundation. Eddie had it all mapped out in a binder he'd been working on for 6 months. The mission statement, the organizational structure, the funding sources. He'd already secured commitments from 3 major donors, all of them veterans who'd made fortunes in business and wanted to give back. But here's the thing, Bobby. Eddie pointed at a section in the binder labeled Program Development. I can raise money, I can manage budgets, I can handle the business side. What I can't do is figure out what actually helps. I've been to 100 veteran events, fundraisers, ceremonies, dog and pony shows where politicians give speeches and everyone claps. But I haven't seen anything that actually changes lives. Not really, that's where you come in. What am I supposed to do? Talk to veterans, go to VA hospitals, clinics, support groups, homeless shelters. Wherever veterans are, that's where you go. Listen to them, figure out what's missing, and then we build programs to fill those gaps. Eddie, I'm not a social worker. I'm not a therapist. I'm just an old Marine with bad dreams. Exactly. You're what they are. That's why they'll talk to you. He closed the binder. Look, the VA does good work. I'm not trying to replace them. But there are things veterans need that fall outside the bureaucracy. Connection, purpose, someone who gives a damn. That's what we're building. A network of people who care, who show up, who remember that the guy sleeping in his car outside the VA clinic isn't a problem to be managed. He's a brother who needs help. Patricia joined us then, bringing out coffee and dessert. She sat down and looked at me with those kind eyes that reminded me of my own mother. Robert, she said softly, Eddie's told me what your daughter did. I want you to know something. When Eddie came home from Vietnam in 1970, he wasn't the same man I'd married 2 years earlier. He had nightmares, terrible ones. He'd wake up swinging. Once he broke my nose without meaning to. We had a baby, Jennifer, and I was terrified. Terrified he'd hurt her. Terrified he'd hurt himself. Terrified I'd made a mistake marrying him. Patricia, Eddie's voice was quiet. No, Eddie, he needs to hear this. She turned back to me. I almost left him, Robert. I packed bags 3 different times. My mother begged me to come home. She said Eddie was dangerous, that I was putting our daughter at risk, and you know what stopped me? What? A woman at the grocery store. An older woman, maybe 60. She saw me crying in the parking lot with Jennifer in the cart, and she came over and asked if I was okay. I told her everything, about Eddie, about the nightmares, about how scared I was, and she looked at me and said something I've never forgotten. She said, my husband came back from World War II and I spent 40 years waking him up from nightmares, 40 years holding his hand while he cried, 40 years watching him fight a war that never really ended. But I also spent 40 years with the bravest, most loyal, most loving man I ever knew. Your husband gave pieces of himself to keep people like us safe. The least we can do is give him the time to put himself back together. Patricia's eyes were wet now. That woman saved my marriage. She saved Eddie's life, probably. Because I went home, and I decided that loving Eddie meant loving all of him. The nightmares, the flashbacks, the days when he couldn't get out of bed. All of it. And you know what I learned, Robert? Those things don't define him. They're just part of the package. The man I love, the man who built a business from nothing, the man who's never forgotten a birthday or anniversary, the man who cries during sappy movies and volunteers at the VA hospital every Tuesday. That's who Eddie is. The nightmares are just something he carries. Like you carry them. Like thousands of veterans carry them. I didn't know what to say. Patricia reached over and squeezed my hand. Your daughter was scared, I understand that. But being scared doesn't give you permission to abandon someone you love. You deserved better than garbage bags and 5 hours' notice. You deserved family who understood that your nightmares don't make you dangerous. They make you human. They make you someone who gave everything and is still trying to find his way back. Thank you, I managed. That means more than you know. She smiled. Now finish your steak before Eddie eats it. He's been eyeing it since you stopped paying attention. The next morning, Eddie woke me at 0600 sharp. Old habits. We went for a walk through the neighborhood as the sun came up over the red rocks. The air was cool and clean, nothing like the humid swamp heat I remembered from Vietnam. Tell me about Da Nang, Eddie said suddenly. What do you remember most? I thought about it. The smell, I said finally. That specific combination of jet fuel, fish sauce, sweat and fear. You could smell it everywhere. In the barracks, on the tarmac, in the villages. It was the smell of war. For me, it's the sound. Eddie was quiet for a moment. The helicopters. Even now, 50 years later, if I hear a helicopter overhead, I'm 20 years old again, humping a radio through rice paddies, waiting for someone to shoot at us. Patricia knows. When we're outside and a helicopter goes by, she just takes my hand and waits for it to pass. Does it ever get easier? No. But you get better at managing it. You learn your triggers. You learn coping mechanisms. You learn to accept that some part of you will always be 20 years old and terrified in a jungle on the other side of the world. And you learn that accepting it doesn't mean it controls you. We walked in silence for a while. Then Eddie said, Bobby, I need to tell you something. When I found out you were living in that studio apartment, that your daughter had kicked you out, I almost drove to Phoenix that night. I wanted to show up at her house and tell her exactly what I thought of her. Patricia talked me out of it. She said you needed an opportunity, not a rescue. She said the worst thing I could do was make you feel like charity. Was she right? She was right. If you'd shown up with pity, I'd have sent you away. But you showed up with a mission. That's different. That's what I thought. See, Bobby, you and I, we're wired the same way. We don't need people to feel sorry for us. We need people to give us something to do, something that matters. The foundation isn't charity for you. It's a deployment, it's a mission, and missions are something we understand. Hua, I said, using the Army expression instead of the Marine one just to annoy him. He grinned. You're still an asshole, Bobby J. Semper Fi, brother. That's when I knew I'd made the right choice. Eddie wasn't trying to save me. He was trying to put me back in the fight, and that's exactly what I needed. I thought about that young woman in the wheelchair at the Phoenix VA, the empty look in her eyes. When do we start? Tomorrow morning. There's a veterans coffee group that meets at a diner in town. I've been going for the past month whenever I'm in Sedona. Mostly Vietnam guys, a few from Korea, one old-timer from World War II. They meet every Monday morning at 0700. I told them I was bringing a friend. The next morning, Eddie and I walked into Betty's diner at 6:55. 7 men sat at a large table in the back. Ages ranged from a man who looked to be in his 90s down to a guy who couldn't have been older than 60. Eddie made introductions. Gentlemen, this is Bobby Jennings, 3rd Marines, Vietnam, 68 to 69. He's staying with Patricia and me for a while. Thought I'd bring him to meet you all. The oldest man at the table, a thin fellow with a World War II patch on his jacket, stood up and offered his hand. Frank Patterson, 101st Airborne, Normandy, Market Garden, the whole show. Welcome, son. We spent 2 hours at that table. The men talked about everything, politics, sports, grandchildren, medical appointments, but underneath it all there was something else. A language that didn't need words. These men understood each other in a way that civilians never could. They'd all seen things that couldn't be unseen, done things they wished they could undo, carried weights that never got lighter. After breakfast, as we walked back to Eddie's Jeep, I said, those men don't need a program. They need exactly what they have. Each other. Right. Eddie nodded. But think about how they found each other. Frank started this group 15 years ago after his wife died, and he realized he didn't have anyone to talk to. He put up flyers at the VA clinic. 7 guys showed up. Now they meet every Monday without fail. But Bobby, how many veterans are out there who don't know this group exists? How many are sitting alone in apartments thinking they're the only ones who wake up screaming? So we connect them. We connect them. And we do more than that. We help them connect to purpose. Because here's what I've learned. The hardest part about leaving the military isn't losing the structure or the paycheck. It's losing the mission. Civilians don't get it. They think we're done serving, but we're not. We just don't know what we're supposed to be serving anymore. Over the next 6 months, I visited 23 VA facilities across Arizona, New Mexico, and Nevada. Eddie came with me to half of them. The other half I went alone. I sat in waiting rooms and struck up conversations. I attended support groups. I visited homeless encampments where veterans lived in tents and cars. And everywhere I went, I asked the same question: what do you need that you're not getting? The answers were surprisingly consistent. Someone to talk to who understands. Help finding work. Help finding housing. Help navigating the VA bureaucracy. But more than anything, they said the same thing over and over. I need to feel like I matter, like what I did meant something, like I'm not just taking up space until I die. At the VA hospital in Tucson, I met a man named Leonard Martinez. Air Force, Gulf War. He'd been sitting in the waiting room for 3 hours for a 10-minute medication review appointment. We started talking because he noticed my 3rd Marines cap. Vietnam? He asked. 68 to 69. You? Kuwait. 91. 19 years old, thought I was invincible. Came home with lungs full of burned pit smoke and a head full of sand. He laughed, but it was bitter. Nobody talks about the Gulf War anymore. It's all Vietnam or Iraq or Afghanistan. Like we didn't matter. Every war matters, I said. Every person who served matters, you'd think so. But try telling that to the VA. I've been waiting 4 months for a disability claim appeal. 4 months. Meanwhile, I'm working at a gas station making $11 an hour because that's all I can get. I'm 51 years old. Air Force trained me as an aircraft mechanic, certified on 6 different airframes. But civilian airlines want certifications I can't afford to get and experience I can't get, because nobody will hire me. So I pump gas and wait for the VA to decide if my breathing problems are service-connected. What happened to your certifications? They expired. I was supposed to keep them current, but I couldn't afford the renewal courses, couldn't afford the testing fees, couldn't afford anything after my wife left and took half of everything. Now I'm 51 with expired certifications and a resume that hasn't been relevant in 15 years. I took his information. 3 weeks later, Eddie and I had connected Leonard with a maintenance company that worked exclusively with military aircraft. They hired veterans, helped them get current certifications, and paid for all the training. Leonard called me the day he got the job offer. Bobby, his voice was shaking. They're offering me $27 an hour. 27. I can get an apartment. I can pay my child support without being late. I can stop eating ramen noodles for every meal. How did you do this? I didn't do anything, Leonard. I just made a phone call. You did everything else. You served. You survived. You kept looking for work even when it felt hopeless. All I did was open a door. You walked through it. The door wouldn't have opened without you. Then keep it open for the next guy. That's the mission now. We help each other. We open doors for each other. And when someone walks through, we teach them to hold the door for whoever's behind them. In Albuquerque, I spent an afternoon at a homeless encampment under an overpass. 43 people living in tents and cardboard shelters. 17 of them were veterans. One was a woman named Angela Reeves, Army, Iraq. She was living in a tent with her 10-year-old daughter. I used to be a military police officer, she told me. Made it to sergeant. Did 3 tours, came home with PTSD and a traumatic brain injury from an IED blast. I was okay for a while. Got a job doing security, but then the migraines started. The memory problems. I'd forget where I was, forget what I was supposed to be doing. Lost the job, lost the apartment, lost everything except Rachel. She looked at her daughter, who was doing homework on a piece of cardboard. I won't lose her. I'll die before I let them take her. Have you applied for disability? Twice. Denied both times. They say my symptoms aren't service-connected. They say I don't have enough medical documentation, but I can't get medical documentation without insurance, and I can't get insurance without a job, and I can't hold a job because of the symptoms. It's a circle with no exit. I spent 2 hours with Angela taking notes, getting details. Then I made calls. Eddie knew a lawyer who specialized in VA disability claims, pro bono for cases like Angela's. I knew a social worker who ran a transitional housing program specifically for homeless female veterans with children. 6 weeks later, Angela and Rachel moved into a 2-bedroom apartment. The lawyer got her disability claim approved on appeal, retroactive pay included. She got medical coverage, treatment for the migraines and the memory issues, and she got something else. She got to look her daughter in the eye and tell her they were going to be okay. Angela called me 3 months later. "Bobby, I'm working again. Part-time at a community center. They work with my medical appointments. They understand the bad days. And Rachel, she's doing better in school now that we're not living in a tent. She's making friends. She's smiling again. I thought I was done. I thought I'd lost everything that mattered, but you showed me I hadn't. I still had Rachel. I still had fight left in me. I just needed someone to remind me. That's all any of us need sometimes. Someone to remind us that we're still in the fight." In Las Vegas, I met a Korean War veteran named Harold Wu. He was 89 years old, sitting alone in the VA hospital cafeteria, eating lunch with hands that shook from Parkinson's. His wife had died 6 months earlier. His children lived on the East Coast and called once a month if he was lucky. "I fought for this country when I was 19 years old, he told me. Froze my ass off in Korea. Watched my friends die. Came home and nobody cared. They called it a police action, like it wasn't a real war, like the men who died weren't real casualties. I built a life anyway. Married Lily. Had 3 kids. Worked as an engineer for 40 years. And now I'm 89, and I eat lunch alone every day, and I wonder what it was all for. It was for freedom, Mr. Wu. Yours and everyone else's." He laughed, a dry sound. "Freedom. I'm free to sit in this cafeteria alone. Free to take 15 pills every morning. Free to wait for my kids to call. Some freedom. How often are you here? 3 times a week, appointments, checkups, the works. It's the only time I leave my apartment. Would you be interested in helping with something?" "Helping? I'm 89 years old. What could I possibly help with? I'm working on a program that connects older veterans with younger ones. You've got 69 years of wisdom since you came home from Korea. There are kids coming home from Iraq and Afghanistan who think their lives are over at 25. They need to hear from someone like you, someone who made it work, someone who built a life after war." Harold looked at me for a long moment. "You're serious?" "Completely. We're starting a mentorship program. Older veterans paired with younger ones. Just conversations. Coffee, phone calls, sharing stories, letting them know they're not alone and that life goes on." Interested? Harold became one of our first mentors. He was paired with a 28-year-old Marine named David Chen, no relation, who'd lost both legs in Fallujah. Harold called me after their first meeting. "Bobby, that boy, David, he thought his life was over. Thought nobody would understand what he's going through. I told him about Korea, about coming home with frostbite so bad I lost 3 toes, about being called a baby killer by people who didn't understand anything, about all the times I wanted to quit. And you know what he said to me?" "What?" "He said thank you. He said knowing I made it through gave him hope that maybe he could too." His voice cracked. "I haven't felt useful in 6 months. Not since Lily died. But today, talking to that boy, I felt like I mattered again. You do matter, Mr. Wu. You always did." The mentorship program became one of our most successful initiatives. Within 6 months, we had 37 mentor pairs across 4 states. Older veterans sharing their experiences with younger ones, teaching them that survival is possible, that life after war, even with its scars and its nightmares and its losses, is still worth living. These weren't just stories I was collecting. They were missions. Each veteran I met became a deployment objective. Figure out what they need. Connect them with resources. Follow up until the mission is complete. Eddie was right. This was exactly what I'd been trained to do. Identify the problem. Develop a solution. Execute. Adapt. Overcome. I documented everything in detailed reports that Eddie and I reviewed every Sunday night. We'd sit in his study, drinking coffee that was too strong and talking about what was working and what wasn't. Eddie handled the business side, fundraising, budgets, legal compliance, all the things that made my head hurt. I handled the people side, the conversations, the connections, the human element that no amount of money or organization could manufacture. Eddie and I compiled everything into a report. Then we built programs around it. The first was simple, a phone line that veterans could call 24 hours a day and talk to another veteran. Not a therapist, not a social worker, just another person who'd served, who understood. We recruited 30 volunteers, all veterans, all trained in basic crisis intervention. The line went live in March. Within 2 weeks, we were getting 60 calls a day. The second program was harder to implement but more important. We called it purpose mapping. The idea was to match veterans with skills to communities with needs. A veteran who'd been a combat medic could volunteer at a community clinic. A veteran who'd been in logistics could help a food bank organize their distribution. A veteran who'd served in military intelligence could teach computer literacy at a library. It wasn't charity. It was connection. It was showing veterans that their skills, the things they'd learned in service, had value in civilian life. By June, we had 47 veterans actively involved in purpose mapping projects across 3 states. One of them was a woman named Sarah Pritchard, an Army nurse who'd done 3 tours in Iraq. She'd been living in her car for 8 months when I met her outside the Albuquerque VA hospital. "I can't hold down a job," she told me. "I make it 3 weeks, maybe 4, and then I have a panic attack in the break room and everyone looks at me like I'm crazy, and I just leave. I can't do it anymore. I can't pretend to be normal." "What if you didn't have to pretend?" I asked. "What if you worked somewhere that expected you to be exactly who you are? That place doesn't exist. It does now. Come with me." I drove her to a free clinic in Albuquerque that served primarily homeless populations. The clinic director, a retired Army doctor named Marcus Holloway, had reached out to our foundation specifically asking for veterans with medical training. "We need people who won't judge," Marcus told Sarah. "People who understand trauma. People who can look at a homeless vet with an infection and see a human being instead of a problem. Can you do that?" Sarah started volunteering there 3 days a week. 6 months later, Marcus hired her full-time. Last I heard, she'd gotten her own apartment and was training new volunteers. That was the moment I understood what Eddie had been trying to tell me back in Phoenix. Veterans don't need charity. They need purpose. They need to know their service didn't end when they took off the uniform. In August, Michelle called me for the first time in 6 months. I almost didn't answer. "Dad?" Her voice was small. "Can we talk?" "We're talking now." "No, I mean really talk. In person. I'd like to come visit you in Sedona if that's okay. I could drive up next weekend, stay at a hotel just for a day." "Why?" "Because I miss you. Because I made a terrible mistake. Because Tyler asked me why Grandpa doesn't love us anymore, and I realized I'd told my children that you were dangerous when the only dangerous thing in that house was my selfishness." She was crying. I could hear it in her voice. And despite everything, despite the garbage bags and the 5 hours notice and the 8 months of silence, I felt something crack open in my chest. "You can stay here. We have plenty of room. Patricia would love to meet you properly." She arrived on Saturday morning, driving a new SUV that probably cost more than I'd made in 5 years as a machinist. Emma and Tyler were with her. Kevin was not. Emma ran to me the moment she got out of the car. "Grandpa, I've missed you so much. Why did you leave?" I knelt down, my bad leg screaming in protest, and hugged her. "I didn't leave, sweetheart. I went somewhere I was needed. But I never stopped thinking about you." Tyler was more cautious. He stood behind his mother, watching me with uncertain eyes. I didn't push, I just smiled at him and said, "Hey, buddy, good to see you." Michelle looked older. Tired. She'd lost weight. There were shadows under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. "Thank you for letting me come," she said quietly. Patricia saved the day. She swept in with her usual warmth, introducing herself to the kids, offering them cookies, showing them the koi pond in the backyard. Within 10 minutes, Emma and Tyler were comfortable, and Michelle and I were sitting alone on the back patio. "I'm sorry," she said immediately. "Dad, I'm so sorry. What I did was unforgivable. I told myself I was protecting my children, but I was really just protecting myself. I was scared. Scared of your nightmares. Scared of what it meant about you. Scared of what it might mean about me someday. The nightmares are part of who I am, Michelle. They don't go away because you put me in a different room. I know that now. I've been seeing a therapist, twice a week since April. She's been helping me understand something. I've been angry at you my whole life for things that weren't your fault. I was angry that Mom left. I was angry that you worked all the time. I was angry that you couldn't fix everything. And when you moved in with us and I saw how broken you really were, all that anger just came pouring out. I'm not broken. My voice was hard. I'm damaged. There's a difference. Broken things don't work anymore. Damaged things work differently, but they still work." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I see that now. Dad, what you're doing with Eddie, this foundation, I looked it up online. I read about the programs you're building. I saw the testimonials from veterans you've helped. You're doing something incredible. I'm just talking to people who've been where I've been. That's what makes it incredible." She reached over and took my hand. "I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know that. But I'm asking for a chance to be the daughter you deserve, a chance to show Emma and Tyler who their grandfather really is. Not the scary man who knocks over bookshelves, but the hero who saves people. I'm not a hero, Michelle. You are to me. You always have been. I just forgot for a while. We talked for 3 hours. She told me about her marriage. Kevin wasn't a bad man, but he'd never understood what it meant to love someone who carried trauma. He saw my nightmares as something that could be managed or medicated away. He didn't understand that some wounds never heal, they just become part of who you are. She told me about Emma's piano lessons, about how good she'd gotten, about Tyler's fascination with astronomy, how he wanted to be an astronaut when he grew up, about her own struggles with anxiety, how she'd started having panic attacks at night, how she finally understood, just a little bit, what I'd been living with for 50 years. "The therapist asked me something," Michelle said quietly. "She asked me what I was so afraid of, and I realized I was afraid of becoming you, afraid that the anxiety I was feeling would turn into full PTSD, afraid that I'd wake up screaming, afraid that my kids would look at me the way I looked at you, with fear instead of love. So I tried to push you away, to create distance between us, like if I could just not see you struggling, then maybe I wouldn't end up struggling the same way. And now I understand that pushing you away didn't protect me from anything. It just meant I lost my father. The kids lost their grandfather. And Kevin," she paused. "Kevin's been staying at his office a lot lately, working late, or so he says. I think we're both realizing that when you hide from difficult things, you end up hiding from each other too. I'm sorry, Michelle. Don't be. It's not your fault." She squeezed my hand. "Dad, can I ask you something? The nightmares, do they ever get better? Some nights are better than others. Patricia wakes me up when it's bad. Eddie and I talk about Vietnam sometimes. That helps more than any medication ever did. Just being able to talk to someone who was there, who understands what we saw, what we did. It doesn't make the nightmares go away, but it makes them feel less isolating. Do you blame Mom for leaving? I used to. When you were young and I was working 2 jobs and barely keeping my head above water, yeah, I blamed her. But now I understand that she couldn't handle what I'd become after Vietnam. She married a 20-year-old kid and got back a 22-year-old stranger who woke up screaming and couldn't hold her without flinching. Some people aren't built for that. It doesn't make them bad, just human." Emma came running over then, Tyler trailing behind her. "Grandpa, Miss Patricia said you were in the Marines. Did you fly helicopters?" "No, sweetheart, I was a rifleman. I carried a gun, and I protected my friends. Were you brave?" I looked at Michelle, then back at Emma. "I was scared every single day, but I did my job anyway. That's what bravery is, being scared and doing what needs to be done anyway." Tyler spoke for the first time since arriving. "Mom said you get nightmares. She said that's why you had to leave." Michelle's face went pale. "Tyler, I held up a hand. "It's okay. Tyler, come here, buddy." He walked over slowly. "I do get nightmares. Bad ones sometimes. Do you know what nightmares are?" He nodded. "They're scary dreams." "That's right. When I was in the war, I saw a lot of scary things. Things that kids should never see. Things that nobody should see, and sometimes when I'm sleeping, my brain remembers those things and turns them into nightmares. When that happens, I might yell or move around. But I want you to know something very important. Those nightmares aren't about you. They're not about your mom or Emma. They're about things that happened a long, long time ago. And even though they're scary for me, they can't hurt you. Do you understand? Are you going to come back home? I'm not sure yet, buddy. Your mom and I are talking about that. But what I want you to know is that I love you. I love Emma. I love your mom. And nothing, not even nightmares, changes that." Tyler thought about this. Then he said, "Mom has nightmares too sometimes. I hear her crying at night." Michelle looked away, her face flushed. "Tyler, it's true. And Dad sleeps at his office a lot now. Emma and I don't like it." Emma nodded. "Everything feels sad now. It was sad when Grandpa left, and now it's sad in a different way." I looked at Michelle. She was crying silently, not even trying to hide it anymore. "How about this?" I said to the kids. "How about you two go help Miss Patricia feed the fish in the pond? She was telling me they like special food. Maybe you can learn how to do it. Then later, we can have lunch and I can tell you some stories about when your mum was your age. Not scary stories, funny ones." "Deal, deal." Emma grabbed Tyler's hand and they ran off toward the pond where Patricia was waiting with a knowing smile. Michelle collapsed forward, her face in her hands. "I've ruined everything. My marriage, my kids' childhood, my relationship with you, everything. Nothing's ruined that can't be repaired. But it takes work. Real work. You need to talk to Kevin. Really talk. Not about logistics or schedules or who's picking up the kids, about what's actually happening in your marriage. And you need to keep seeing your therapist. And if you're ready, you and I can start over. Not where we were, but somewhere new. I want that. I really do. Can I bring the kids to visit again? You can visit any time. But Michelle, I'm not moving back to Scottsdale. This is my home now. The foundation, the work Eddie and I are doing, this is my mission. This is where I need to be, I understand." She wiped her eyes. "I'm proud of you, Dad. I should have said that months ago. I'm proud of the man you are, the man you've always been. I'm sorry it took losing you to figure that out. We spent the rest of the afternoon together. I taught Emma how to play a simple chess opening. I showed Tyler the constellation maps I'd been studying, explaining how Marines used to navigate by stars before GPS. Patricia made her famous chocolate chip cookies, and the kids ate until they were in sugar comas. Before they left, Emma hugged me tight. "I love you, Grandpa. Please don't be mad at Mum anymore." "I'm not mad, sweetheart, I promise." Tyler hugged me too, less enthusiastically but genuine. "Bye, Grandpa. I hope you don't have nightmares tonight." "Me too, buddy. Me too." Michelle was the last to hug me. She held on longer than necessary. "Thank you," she whispered, "for giving me another chance, for showing my kids who you really are, for not giving up on us. Family doesn't give up, Michelle, even when it's hard, even when it hurts. That's what makes it family." As I watched them drive away, Eddie came and stood next to me. "That looked like it went well. It's a start. Just a start. Sometimes that's all you need. A starting point. The rest is just putting one foot in front of the other until you get where you're going. When did you become such a philosopher? Patricia makes me watch Oprah reruns. It's rubbing off." I laughed. It felt good. After 8 months of anger and hurt and isolation, laughing felt like coming home. I'm not going to lie and tell you everything was perfect after that day. Relationships that break don't heal overnight. But it was a start. Michelle began visiting once a month, bringing the kids. Emma started calling me every Wednesday night just to talk. Tyler slowly warmed up to me, and by Christmas he was asking me to teach him how to tie the knots I'd shown him a year earlier. Kevin and I reached an understanding. He apologized in his own way, which mostly consisted of being less of an ass when Michelle brought the kids to Sedona. I didn't need his friendship. I just needed him not to stand between me and my grandchildren. The foundation grew beyond anything Eddie and I had imagined. By the end of the first year, we had 300 volunteers across 5 states. The phone line was getting 200 calls a day. The Purpose Mapping program had placed 417 veterans in meaningful work. We'd secured funding to expand into Texas and Colorado, but the thing I was most proud of was something smaller. Every Monday morning, I still went to breakfast with Frank Patterson and the guys at Betty's Diner. The group had grown from 7 to 19. We'd had to move to a bigger table. And every week, at least one new veteran showed up, usually someone who'd heard about the group from another veteran, or from our foundation, or from a VA counselor who actually gave a damn. One Monday in March, almost exactly 2 years after Michelle had packed my things in garbage bags, a young man walked into the diner wearing a Marine's cap. He couldn't have been older than 25. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, clearly nervous, before Frank waved him over. "You look like you could use some coffee and some company, son. Come sit down." The young man sat down next to me. His hands were shaking slightly. I noticed the prosthetic left hand immediately but didn't comment on it. "First time?" I asked quietly. He nodded. "I saw a flyer at the VA clinic. Figured I'd check it out. I don't really know anyone in Sedona. Just moved here last month. Good place to start over. I'm Bobby. 3rd Marines, Vietnam. Jackson." His voice was barely above a whisper. "2nd Marines, Afghanistan. Lost the hand in Helmand Province 2 years ago, been trying to figure out what to do with myself since. I looked at this young man, this kid who'd given a piece of himself to his country, and was now sitting in a diner trying to figure out how to build a life with what remained. And I thought about myself 2 years ago, sitting on a bench outside a hospital with garbage bags full of my life, wondering if anything I'd done had mattered. "Do you know what I've learned?" I said. "The hardest part about leaving the Marines isn't losing what you lost in combat. It's losing your mission, your purpose, the thing that made you get up every morning and know exactly what you were supposed to do. Civilians don't understand that. They think we're done serving, but we're not. We're just looking for a new way to serve." Jackson looked at me with eyes that were older than they should have been. "How do you find it? The new way? You start by showing up, just like you did this morning. You sit with people who understand. You talk. You listen. And slowly you start to see that maybe your service didn't end when you left the uniform. Maybe it just changed shape." I told him about the foundation, about purpose mapping, about the phone line, about all the ways veterans were finding new missions and new reasons to keep going. When breakfast ended, Jackson shook my hand with his remaining one. "Thank you, Bobby. Really, this helped. Come back next Monday. And bring your phone number. I know some people who might be able to help you figure out what comes next." He did come back. And the Monday after that. And the Monday after that. 3 months later, he was volunteering with the foundation, answering calls on the crisis line. 6 months later, he'd started a support group specifically for young combat veterans dealing with physical injuries. Last I heard, the group had 23 members and was meeting twice a week. That's how change happens, not through grand gestures or massive programs, but through small moments. One conversation at a time, one veteran helping another veteran, one person deciding that their pain might have a purpose if they can use it to help someone else carry theirs. I'm 75 years old now. The shrapnel in my leg hurts more than it used to. The nightmares haven't stopped, but they've gotten less frequent. Patricia and Eddie have become the family I needed, the one I chose instead of the one I was born into. Michelle and I are rebuilding what we broke, one visit at a time, one honest conversation at a time. The foundation continues to grow. We're in 12 states now, over 1,000 volunteers. We've helped place more than 2,000 veterans in meaningful work. The phone line gets 400 calls a day. We've saved 38 lives that we know of, probably more that we'll never hear about. But I don't measure success in numbers. I measure it in moments, in the voice of a veteran on the phone at 3 in the morning, telling me that talking to another Marine kept them from eating their gun. In the email from Sarah Pritchard, telling me she's been sober for 18 months and just got promoted to assistant director at the clinic. In Emma calling me every Wednesday night to tell me about her week, never once acting like I'm too broken to be part of her life. I measure it in the fact that I wake up every morning with a mission. I'm still serving, just in a different uniform. People sometimes ask me if I forgive Michelle for what she did. It's complicated. I understand why she did it. Fear makes people cruel in ways they don't even recognize. But understanding isn't the same as forgetting. I carry that day with me. The garbage bags, the 5 hours notice, the feeling of standing in a parking lot with nowhere to go. But I also carry what came after. The chance Eddie gave me, the purpose we built together, the lives we've touched, the veterans we've helped. If Michelle hadn't kicked me out, none of that would have happened. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the doorway to the best thing you never knew you needed. That's what I tell the veterans I meet now. The ones who are where I was 2 years ago. Alone, scared, wondering if their service mattered, wondering if they matter. I tell them what Frank Patterson told that young Marine with the prosthetic hand. You look like you could use some coffee and some company. And then I sit with them, I listen, I share my story, I help them understand that the mission didn't end when they took off the uniform. It just changed. And sometimes, if they're ready to hear it, I tell them what I've learned about family. Family isn't the people who share your blood. It's the people who show up. The people who see you at your worst and choose to stay. The people who understand that broken is just another word for human, and human means worthy of love and respect and a place at the table. My daughter packed my life into garbage bags and told me I was too broken to be around her children. She was wrong. I wasn't too broken. I was exactly broken enough to understand what other broken people needed. And that understanding became my purpose. I'm Robert Samuel Jennings. I'm 75 years old. I served 2 tours in Vietnam with the 3rd Marine Division. I raised a daughter alone. I worked as a machinist for 41 years. And now I run a foundation that helps veterans find their way home, not to a place, but to a purpose. I still have nightmares. I still wake up screaming sometimes, and Patricia comes to my room and reminds me where I am, just like she does for Eddie. I still set off metal detectors at airports. I still have days when getting out of bed feels like climbing a mountain. But I have a mission. I have brothers and sisters who understand. I have a family I chose and who chose me. And I have the knowledge that what I'm doing matters, that the uniform I wore 50 years ago still means something, that my service didn't end. It evolved. That's what I want you to understand if you're listening to this and you're a veteran who feels lost. You're not done serving. You're just between missions. And there are people waiting to help you find the next one. People who understand. People who've been where you are. People who know that the hardest battle isn't the one you fought overseas. It's the one you fight every day to believe that you still matter. You do matter. Your service mattered. And the fact that you're still here, still fighting, still trying to figure out what comes next, that matters most of all. Find your people. Find your purpose. And remember that family is what you make it. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you will fail you. But that doesn't mean you're unlovable. It just means you haven't found your real family yet. I found mine in a breakfast diner in Sedona, sitting with men who understood what it meant to serve and sacrifice and survive. I found it in a foundation built on the simple idea that veterans need purpose more than they need pity. I found it in a second chance with my daughter, earned through honesty and hard work, and the willingness to forgive, even when forgetting isn't possible. And I found it in every phone call, every conversation, every moment when a veteran realized they weren't alone anymore, that they had brothers and sisters who would show up, who would sit with them, who would remind them that their mission didn't end. It just changed. That's what a veteran still carries, not just the weight of what we've seen and done, but the strength to carry each other, to serve each other, to show up for each other when the world turns away. My daughter thought I was too broken to be around her children. She was right about one thing. I am broken. We all are. Every veteran carries fractures that will never fully heal, but broken doesn't mean useless. Broken doesn't mean finished. Broken just means we know what pain feels like, and that knowledge makes us exactly the right people to help others who are hurting. So to every veteran reading this, listening to this, wondering if their service mattered, wondering if they matter, I want you to hear this clearly. You matter. You served with honor, and your mission isn't over. It's just waiting for you to find it. Find your people. Find your purpose. And remember that the uniform you wore, whether it was 50 years ago or 5 years ago, still means something. It means you answered the call when your country needed you, and now other veterans need you. Not your strength, not your perfection, just your presence, your understanding, your willingness to show up. That's what I learned from Eddie Kozlowski and Frank Patterson and Sarah Pritchard and Jackson and all the others. We save each other. Not through grand gestures, but through small moments of connection. Through cups of coffee at 7 in the morning. Through phone calls at 3 in the morning. Through the simple act of sitting with someone and saying, I've been where you are, and you're not alone. That's what veterans carry, the weight of our past and the strength to help each other build a future. And that's a mission worth serving. That's a purpose worth fighting for. That's a family worth choosing. Semper Fi doesn't end when you take off the uniform. It just becomes a different kind of fidelity to each other, to our shared mission, to the belief that no veteran should ever feel as alone as I felt standing in that hospital parking lot with my life in garbage bags. We're still serving, we're still fighting, we're still Marines, still soldiers, still airmen, still sailors. We just wear different uniforms now. And our mission is simple. Take care of each other. Show up for each other. Remind each other that we matter. That's what a veteran still carries. And that's what makes us stronger than any force that tries to break us, including the ones we love who don't understand, including ourselves when we forget our own worth. We carry each other. And that's enough. That's always been enough. Welcome home, brothers and sisters. Your mission continues. And we'll be here waiting at the table, ready to pour you some coffee and remind you that you're not alone. You never were. You just forgot for a while. We all forget sometimes. That's why we need each other to remember, to remind, to carry on.